Hey friends, it's Simon Hurley from Inklips and welcome back to another video. Now in today's tutorial, I'm going to be sharing a lot of the basics of stamping. So in my line we have clear photopolymer stamps. I'm going to walk through how to use them, how to care for them, and how to get a really great clean and crisp stamped image with my inks. I think it's really important to know that, to use your tools properly, to create really beautiful cards in the end. And there's a certain technique to kind of stamping perfectly to get a really great image every single time by using a couple different tips and tricks. So without further ado, let's get started. So the Simon Hurley Create line has clear photopolymer stamps. These are 6x9 stamp sets, so they're rather large, but they're packed with lots of images. And these ones are hand drawn by me, which is so much fun, and I love using them on my card. But this photopolymer is a super high quality material. What I love about it is that it's super thin, so you're able to store lots in your stash, which I know as crafters, we all love having lots of stamps. And you're able to see through them, which comes in handy with lots of different techniques, and really helps out when you're trying to stamp an image in place. So these come on acetate sheets like this. It comes with one on the front and one on the back here. So to open this up, I'm just going to gently peel off that backer sheet, and then you've revealed all your images here that are stuck to the front backer sheet. And this one's attached, so you're gonna wanna keep both of them. To get an image, all I do is slowly peel it and gently off the backer sheet like that, and you have your image really nicely there. So look at that. Now this image will have kind of this smooth side onto it. That's going to be the clingy side. So it'll cling right onto an acrylic block. Now an acrylic block is kind of that piece of acrylic, and you can reuse these over and over. So you can have just a couple different sizes for all your stamp sets. And to get this onto here, all you do is put your little stamp down and it's going to cling onto there. Now one important tip when I do this, especially if you have a rather large stamp and there's some open spaces, to press it down to get all the air bubbles out. That's going to make sure you get a really nice stamped image. And if you don't see many air bubbles in here, it's fine if there's a couple, but if you don't see many air bubbles, that's how you know you're going to have a great cling and it's going to stamp really nicely later on. And if you want to, peel your stamp off to put another stamp on, all you do is gently peel it off just like you did from the backer sheet, and then you just place it right back onto the background, and then you're able to easily store your stamp set away, which is really nice. That's what I love about these clear stamps, is you can just have a couple of acrylic blocks and a couple of stamp sets and kind of interchange them all, which makes them super versatile. Now once I've got my image on my acrylic block like I showed, let's get into stamping. So I'm going to use my WOOF colored ink. I love my bright colors, but we're doing a little rocket ship here, so I thought I would use my gray. This one's named after my dog. And let's get into stamping. Now this isn't going to be too hard since it's a lined image, but I'll show you with a more solid image in just a little bit. When I stamp, I like to take my ink pad to the surface and I like to place kind of my finger here. So just do a couple taps on there. You don't need tons of pressure, but you do need to tap it more than once in order to get the ink really fully covered on that stamp nicely. And then if I want to go in, I can go in with another color. Let's do traffic cone here. This is that bright orange. And this is the advantage of these being clear stamps, is I can turn this over. You see that little flame there? I can cover that flame with some ink, which is super cool. So since that's clear, I was able to dip my ink pad right into there and create that cool stamped image. So you ready? We're going to stamp this down onto our surface. Give it some good pressure. And look at that. Such a fun image, and you get all those nice little details in there, which I really love. So these are water-based inks, so they're going to stamp really nicely. I wanted to make sure that they stamped and did techniques really well. Okay, so for a more solid stamp, I'm going to use this sentiment here that says, hey. It's got some solid areas in there, so I peeled it off the backer sheet. I'm going to then place it onto an acrylic block. And when choosing an acrylic block, you want to make sure that the size kind of appropriately fits the image that you're using. So I'm going to use a smaller acrylic block for this image here. Make sure to kind of press it down, and there's little air bubbles in there, so that's going to mean that we're going to get a good image. And then I'll go in, let's see, what color do I want to use? Let's do Remember Me, kind of that space blue color, let's do. So I'm going to lift off my ink pad lid. Now these are made out of a felt surface, and most ink pads are. That kind of is a great surface for the ink to sit in, and it holds the ink nicely, but it also transfers the ink to your stamp really nicely. It does have a little bit of a texture, so to make sure you don't get that texture in your stamp, you don't want to just press it once like that. You want to make sure to apply some good pressure there and tap it several times to get that ink evenly dispersed onto that stamp. So once you've tapped it several times, you know you're not going to get that texture there anymore. I'm going to flip this image over, and then I can apply even pressure and stamp it down onto my surface there. So there we go, that really awesome image, and it's really nice and smooth stamped, which I absolutely love. And you want to make sure you tap several times to do that. Now let me show you some things that you don't want to do when you're stamping, because these are some common mistakes, and it can be a little bit difficult to ink up a stamp the first time. I know I just recently did that video with my mom, and she kind of didn't really know how to ink up a stamp because it can be kind of confusing to know how to apply the ink, especially if it's a larger stamp or anything like that. So some common things that people might be kind of doing wrong is some people think that you have to swipe your ink over top of the surface. And if you swipe the ink, it's still applying ink down, because if you press over top of, you know, a stamp, it's going to apply the ink and release it. But let me show you what that does. So as you stamp that down, it's actually going to give you that same texture of where you swiped it. So you can see those fun lines in there. Now that's a cool technique, actually. It creates a really cool look. If you have some solid flower stamps or anything like that, I actually have a video showing that, so I'll link it on screen here. But that can be a really fun technique, but if you want a solid image, that's not what you're going for. So make sure you do those tapping motions. And then another common mistake is just kind of tapping it once. And if you do like a firm pressure and tap it once like that, let me show you what that looks like. I'm just gonna stamp that down. And with that, you get a little bit of the texture of the felt pad. Again, it's going to still transfer that ink nicely because that felt releases the ink. But if you just tap it once and get that kind of pressure going there, it's going to leave those imprints in there. So you want to make sure you tap kind of lightly over top of the surface, almost dance on top of your stamp there. Just a couple light taps. Once you've done that, you can kind of tilt your ink in the light to see if it's going to stamp well. And if you notice you missed a little area there, that can be another helpful tip with clear stamps. So if you noticed you missed an area, you're always able to go back, re-ink it up, give it some good taps, and then stamp it down once more. So there we go. That's how to stamp really nicely. Again, those two are totally fine too if you want that kind of textured look. There can be some cool techniques you do with that, but to make sure you get a really good stamped image, I like to tap several times and kind of use my ink pad over top like this. Now you could totally dip your stamp into your ink pad as well. It's not my preferred method of stamping, but let me show you what that looks like too. So you can totally take your I'm just going to take my image and tap it on the surface there, and I'll stamp it down. So you'll notice that still gives a great look as well. Now, I personally like to lift my ink pad up, but you know, any of these kind of techniques, methods that these three on the top have are really great ways of stamping. And again, like I said, there's nothing wrong with stamping like the bottom two, but just know that's going to give you a little bit of texture in there. Okay, so now let's get into cleaning and caring for your stamps, because it's pretty important to take some good care of these as you've invested your money in them and you want them to last a long time. So with this clear stamp, I just got done stamping that blue ink with it. There's a little bit of blue ink left onto it, not too much though. And what's nice about my inks is that they're water reactive. So all I'm going to do is go in with a rag to clean this off, spray a little bit of water on my cloth, and then I'm just going to go in and wipe that off the surface. With my inks, they're good as new after that. They're not going to stain. Look at that. It's a perfectly clean stamp again, which I love about my inks. If you want an ink that's not going to stain, the Simon Hurley Create inks are great for you. And this can go right back into your package on the backer sheet and go right back into storage. Let's talk about something if you use like an archival or a more permanent ink. Let me stamp this down. So I'm going to use the jet black archival ink, again, doing light taps. You can see if that full thing is covered. There we go. So once I've got that all covered, you can kind of tilt it in there to make sure that everything is going to stamp nicely. I'll stamp that image down, giving it some good pressure on my acrylic black. Okay, so once I've stamped that down, I'm going to clean this off. And what I like to use to clean this off is archival ink cleaner. It's got it right in the name. It's going to take off your ink really nicely. Now this has a little dabber top on it, so all I'm going to do is tap it onto my stamp. Just a little bit to apply that ink on there, or to apply that cleaner on there, sorry. And then I'm going to take my rag, and I love using this because it's reusable and it's not going to leave like paper towel fuzzies on your stamps. I find that can be quite aggravating if you do use paper towels. It can kind of leave a little bit of residue and fuzzies on there, which you don't want. So I'm going to clean that off. Now it does leave a little bit of staining. See, look, it doesn't clean it off fully, but this is not going to transfer onto your next image. So if you clean it off nicely with that archival ink cleaner, it's going to leave a little bit of stain. A stained stamp is a love stamp. What can you do? It just shows you're using your stamps and loving them really nicely. So it's going to stain a little bit, but it's not going to transfer over into your next stamped image. So all you need to do is peel this off the acrylic block. I got my backer sheet here. I'm going to place my stamp right back onto the sheet, and it's good as new, ready to be used for the next time you stamp. Now let's talk about if you have a really loved stamp. This one's from the Dudes 2 stamp set. You're saying, surely my stamp can't last forever, right? And the back kind of gets a little bit less tacky over time. And I'm going to show you how to fix that. So if it's not sticking well to your acrylic black, that doesn't mean your stamp is dead. Trust me, you've still got lots of life left in it. What that means is that the back of your stamp is covered with maybe dust or debris, and it's not going to stick as well because it's not as clean on the back. So it's pretty simple to clean this and renew it just like a regular stamp. And all I'm going to do is go in with a little bit of water. You can spray it over top. You can also bring this into a little tub of water and do this with several stamps at once with a mild soap and some water to kind of clean this off. But what I'm going to do right here is if you're just in your craft room and you have your little spray bottle and you want it to stick right away, all I'm going to do is rub a little bit of water all over this. You can feel kind of those particles getting removed. And then you could either let it air dry or tap a little bit of that excess water off with a cloth that's, again, not going to leave any marks on there. That makes it really nice and sticky, good as new. And then I'm able to grab an acrylic block. This one doesn't quite match it up, but grab an acrylic block there and stick it right down, and look, that stamp is good as new, ready to stamp. It's sticking really nicely to that acrylic block, which is really awesome. And making sure that it's nice and clean and that you care for your stamps over time is a really great way to kind of revive your stamps and continue to use them over time, because they really do last a long, long time. Okay, so now that I've shared kind of the basics of stamping to get you guys to understand kind of how to use the photopolymer stamps if you're a beginner, they're really awesome stamp to work with, and then also how to make sure that you get a really great solid image with your stamps. That's super important to me that you guys know how to do that with the Simon Hurley ink pad so you can get your crisp images every single time. Now that I showed you kind of the basics, let me jump into kind of some really fun techniques you could do to use the ink pads and stamp with them and get a little bit more out of them. So this first one is going to be using my Dude stamp set from the Dudes 2. I just love this one, and we're going to do a little bit of ombre stamping with 3 colors. So I'm going to use Triple Berry at the beginning here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of ink this stamp up again, doing a couple different taps and pressing that center down. And you're not going to, it doesn't really matter to me to cover the full stamp, because here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my little cloth here, and I'm just going to tap off some of the ink from that top edge. And again, my ink removes really nice and easily, which I love. It's that water-based ink, so it's going to remove off your stamp really nicely. And what that's going to do is I'm going to remove some ink from that top and bottom surface. And then I'm going to go in with Remember Me, which is my blue color, and I'm just going to kind of just take my ink pad and roll it onto the surface. I'm not going over top of the whole stamp. I'm actually just going to roll it. And again, doing that light tapping motion, but kind of in a rolling form, is going to give you that really cool ombre fade between colors. And I'll do the same thing where I wiped that ink off at the top. Here I'm using Bee Sting, and I'm going to do a little bit of ink rolling up there. So just rolling my color on slightly. And what that's going to do is it's going to give you a really cool look. So let me stamp this down onto my surface here. Give it some good pressure to make sure that ink transfers. And there we go. Look at how fun that is. Getting that fun ombre color in there is super awesome. And I love how nicely it blends there. Look, between colors, you can see that blend is really awesome. And these dry down in the paper really quickly, like I'm running my finger over it like right away, and it's not moving. So it's that dye ink which is going to sink into the surface, which I love if you're an impatient or fast crafter like me and you don't want to make sure that anything needs time to dry. So again, cleaning this off, super simple. It's going to take a little bit of water, spray it on there, or you could spray it right onto your rag. It's either way. And then I can quickly wipe off my stamp, and it's really easily clean and ready to go. Now let's use some Remember Me to show another technique. So I'm going to just ink up my stamp, give it some light taps all over to make sure that's nice and inked up. Again, you can tilt it in the light to make sure again too. I'm going to stamp that down. We're going to get a really solid image that first time. And then if I move my stamp down a little bit, I'm going to stamp again, and look at that lighter image you can get with it. And you can even stamp one more time, and you get an even lighter image. So that's another thing that I really love about my inks, is if you're into really stamp layering and things like that are super fun techniques, look at that. You can stamp off on the surface and then get that lighter color first if you want to, or even get that super light color. So by using it like this, if you stamp off on a scrap sheet and then go onto your project, if you're doing stamp layering or things like that, you can really almost get 3 colors out of one ink pad, which I just love. So that one ink pad gives you these 3 colors, and they're all in that same color shade, so it's no difficulty finding, colors that match together really nicely, which I absolutely love. Okay, one more. Let's use traffic cone this time. This is a really nice bright orange color. I'm going to stamp this down by just giving it some good taps all over the stamp to make sure it's nice and covered. You can see that the ink is covering the surface nicely. And then let me cover this ink pad because we're going to use a little bit of water here. Now my inks are a water reactive dye-based ink. It's really important to me to make sure they stamp and react with water. So let me show you this. I'm going to spray some water over top of the surface. That's going to give you a really cool watercolor kind of look. So I'll wipe off my surface, any excess water there. And then you can see that kind of ink pooling up on the stamp a little bit. It's going to give a really cool watercolor look. So when we stamp it down here, it's not going to be nearly as crisp, but look at that. Maybe I should show this too with like a floral image or things like that. It looks super awesome. But if you're going for kind of a more messy or watercolor look, these inks are really good at doing just that. And look again here, there's still more ink left on the stamp. So if you want to, you can totally stamp that again, adding a little bit of pressure. It's not going to stamp fully solid this time because that water is kind of moving it around and mixing it. But you can see it kind of fades out the lines a little bit and gives you that cool hand-painted look if you want that. Alright, thank you guys so much for joining me in today's video. It was really awesome to kind of share some of those stamping tips with you guys and make sure that you're able to get a really great solid impression every time. So if you're a beginner or if you're into stamping and aren't really sure how to ink up that stamp perfectly, those are some really awesome tips to make sure you get a really great crisp image every single time, making sure your stamp is pushed down nicely and then making sure that you tap the image several times with your ink pad and give it some really great inking and look in the light to make sure that it's inked up before you even stamp it down. Sometimes if you miss a little area of the stamp, it can be devastating to ruin a project. So just going over some of those basic things to make sure you get that solid image every time is really awesome and really important to me that you guys know how to do that with the Simon Hurley Create inks. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up. If you want to see more like this from me, be sure to click that subscribe button down below and ring that little bell next to the subscribe button to make sure you get all my notifications for future card making and crafting videos. And be sure to leave a comment down below. I always love hearing from you guys and chatting with you down there. It's always awesome to interact. And I'll see you guys very soon for another card making and crafting video. Have an awesome day. Bye.